Hi, let me start with a shout out to those that did a comprehensive review of POLK Audio Reserve products. They influenced me to get the POLK Audio R100 and R700 Reserve speakers. Those influential YouTube guys are Randy, the Cheap Audio Man, Audioholics, and Andrew Robinson, the Recovering Audiophile. I'm using this video to cover 3 areas you should consider if you're on the fence about POLK Reserve or maybe some other affordable hi-fi speakers that are usually sold direct but not always, like Klipsch, Ascend, Arendal, and Emotiva. There are others out there, but those are among the most popular. Anyway, the 3 areas I'm going to cover are: what is a recovering audiophile? What did Andrew Robinson mean about that? Then I'm going to go then versus now, value in the high end. This is why you should not be afraid of the new stuff and why some of your older expectations are wrong. And what sonic opinion are you after? Notice I didn't say realism or high fidelity. Sonic opinion are what speakers have. None of them are exactly like live. So you have to choose which sound that you are after. And it's best to get something closest to what you like. First, Andrew Robinson describes himself as a recovering audiophile. I know what he's talking about. I'm the same way. Let's see if this describes you. You buy speakers that cost thousands. Those that are recommended by Stereophile or the Absolute Sound. They have to appear on one of those lists. Otherwise, you may not even pay attention to them. You don't think twice about spending hundreds or even thousands on interconnects and cables. You just can't imagine buying certain brands below a certain high price point. Affordable speakers? Pfft. You better have a big price tag. You're not even going to look at it. You float a high credit card balance and you will find yourself changing components frequently. When I say frequently, you understand that some people have speaker components for years, if not decades. But you find yourself changing maybe even weekly. People do that. You decide you're going to reject measurements and double blind testing unless the results just happen to coincide with your opinion. Otherwise, they're invalid. Oh, wait, that affordable speaker measured like crap, so it sounds like crap. Oh, wait, but those $7,000 a pair speakers measured like crap, but that's just not the way they sound. That's hypocrisy, and that plays into this whole role. Next thing, you are spending as much or more time online discussing your stereo, bragging about it, or lording it over others as if they have inferior gear or inferior listening skills. You start using weasel terms, like, well, everybody has different ears, and oh, when are you going to upgrade that, and so on and so forth. You hear things in the audio spectrum, supposedly, and you declare they are unmeasurable. You declare that. It doesn't mean they aren't unmeasurable, but this is what you have declared. And finally, when I talk about declarations, I mean you cannot delineate or separate your subjective opinion from fact. You treat them as one and the same. This describes you. You are mentally ill. No, I don't mean audiophile. And unfortunately, through this process, you've become an insufferable dick. You have become a rotten human being to others online and sometimes in person. I've seen middle-aged men in a knockdown, drag-out fight over cables, their subjective opinion. You know how childish and pathetic that is? That is mentally ill, and you need to seek help for that. The gear at that point owns you, not the music. That is what I mean by audiophile. It's an addiction you need to break, like drugs or alcohol. There are guys that have gone bankrupt overspending on gear that they just had to have because it might be slightly better. It might just be a little bit 1% improvement. So that justifies laying out hundreds or thousands for a hospital-grade power cord or some tweak that you saw in a magazine. That's called chasing the dragon, looking for perfection that you will never achieve. Let me repeat that. Perfection you will never achieve. It's like gambling. You just can't stop. Now, that's not everybody in the hobby, and it's not the same because not everybody that drinks or uses some drugs recreationally are an out-of-control addict. But it does describe a significant number of guys. And unfortunately, it is the ugly side of what is a subjective hobby. But people don't treat it that way. You want to know the sad part? This kind of segues into the second section. A lot of high-end gear is an outright scam. It's overpriced for the sake of commanding respect in the deep pocket snob universe. Snobs won't take things seriously without a high price tag. Never mind that several high-end brands don't just measure poorly. Some speakers costing north of 20 grand a pair have $500 in parts inside. There's no way to correlate parts versus end price. And yes, I know they've got overhead to pay for, but ridiculous is ridiculous. It's not the 3 to 5 to 6 times markup. It's sometimes a 10, 20, 30 or more times markup. It's insane. And no, do not compare a speaker to a luxury or a sports car. Well, I bought the Ferrari of speakers. No, you didn't. Sports cars have 20,000 parts, and they have measured performance, all physics. There is no placebo effect like audio has. People can hear things they want to hear in audio, but unfortunately when it comes to cars, when the green flag drops, the bullshit stops. That means point A to point B takes X amount of time, plus or minus tenth of a second or whatever the time happens to be. It's measured and cannot be altered by perception. You've heard the old Rush song, Show Don't Tell. You know, you can alter perceptions all you want, but reality won't budge. Unlike audio, where people budge it all the time. Anyway, audiophiles get taken in by marketing, hype, and the ego-massaging high price. It's shiny, it's heavy, it's attractive. It looks like jewelry in your house. There's nothing wrong with that in itself, but some people are more obsessed with that than they are sound. There are things speakers do to fake detail and dimensionality, like they'll have a slight scoop out in the upper mids, followed by some kind of exotic tweeter that is over bright to compensate for the mid scoop. They often have that extra hard edge that makes it sound like they have more detail, but they really don't. They're compensating for a canyon there and some really bad measurements on top of that. They may roll off the treble, sometimes as low as 7K, or limit bass to make the mids more prominent. Expensive cables and wires have no gain. You bought a piece of wire, there's no amplification involved. They can only subtract, or they can deliver the signal intact without alteration, but they cannot amplify. They don't do that. By rolling off or slightly fuzzing up like a filter, like Analysis Plus and other exotic cables, will give you that slight bit of fuzz. You paid basically hundreds or thousands of dollars for this type of a filter. Exotic metals like beryllium, magnesium, titanium, and even diamond are not superior to silk or textile. Metals have a resonance. They ring. The non-metal item, beryllium and titanium, they don't have a huge ring compared to other materials, but at the same time, they also have an unusually hard tone. Cymbals sound unnatural to me, no matter what their implication is, and no matter how much you spent on a speaker, I can hear it, and I've done so, and they just don't sound natural. The type of thing that sounds natural to me are silk and textile. I got to listen to vintage B&W DM series and compare them to the Diamond. The vintage polyester and polymer tweeters blended better and sounded more natural than the Diamond did. The Diamond stuck out by itself like it was its own speaker. The same goes for Kef. My old 104.2s with the cube sounded flatter and less colored than the new LS50 or even the Metas, which have a metallic tinge to the treble. In other words, you guys can keep your exotic gimmicks. I'll stick to the silk and textile like Vifa, SB Acoustics, and Scanspeak Revelators. By the way, SB Acoustics are guys from Scanspeak that are making their product overseas that is really close or maybe even as good as the Revelators for a fraction of the cost. So keep that in mind. Companies like Triad used to use Scanspeak, and now my understanding is that they use SB Acoustics. You're not sacrificing the quality. Now, when you snap out of this haze and this obsession that you have, you will realize that we are no longer in the 80s or 90s. Back then, most products were made domestically with a high overhead, and you had to pay a lot of money for good stuff because the affordable alternatives could be pretty poor with few exceptions. That was when Dave Wilson said, "I don't make speakers for poor people. If you want high-end, you got to pay for it." And that was what I consider the big bang of arbitrary extreme overpricing and the boutique stuff. The magazines didn't do any bad reviews of expensive stuff because they paid a lot of money for their ad space. So you're going to read about these hyped, incredible brands, like Wilson and others that have a whole lot of flaws and they measure really poorly. They're designed to impress and reviewers, okay? And there are online sources like the late Richard Hardesty, the watchdog, who measured and took apart these Wilson Watt Puppy 5s And what he found was shocking to say the least, but it reinforces what I've heard in every single Wilson demo I've heard. That etched treble that sounds really hokey because the tioxide dome had a resonance to it, and other oddball issues that I heard with it. They didn't impress me despite the snobs loving this particular brand and lording it over other people. I say, you can keep that stuff. That is just not my cup of tea. And I feel vindicated after I saw those measurements, reinforcing what I had to say. One standout back in the day, Paradigm, which did its testing in the Canadian National Research Facility and created some very balanced and smooth speakers without the high price gouge. You just compare the measurements of the Studio 100s, for example, back in the day, to the set of Wilson Watt puppies, and you will find that the Paradigms are smoother and more even across the entire spectrum when compared to the $20,000 pair of Wilson Watt puppies. You tell me, if you were in a blind test with these, the thing that you would pick more is either if you happen to like the forward and etch sound, or you like to have a more balanced sound. I personally would take a set of Paradigms any day a week over these Wilson products, but that's me. That's my opinion, but that's also my background. I'm so over the boutique. Now, we have teams of engineers that design domestically and build overseas and sell directly. There's no markup for the middleman, no costly domestic labor and parts. You can now get so-called budget components and speakers that perform as well or better than high-end brands did now and in the past. The bloated overhead is gone. You want an example of how this process works? Read the book Shit Happened about the company Shit Audio and see how they cut out the cost bloat. They point out several things in the high end, including elaborate headquarters and overhead expense and all these other prestige costs that they have that Shit Audio has eliminated from the whole process. That's why you can buy something like the Freya S, which I happen to have one, and I noticed after I bought it, Stereophile classified it as a Class A component. That's rare to unheard of for a product that's that affordable. It's not even $1,000 and it's a Class A. That would never happen in the 90s. Anyway, since 2020, both electronics and speakers have leaped in quality. They have, by and large, eliminated electrolytic caps in the mid and treble audio path. There's good reason for it. Electrolytics have high ESR, they have memory retention, they have other issues that smear the sound. Even when they're brand new, they're not that good. And the older they get more resistive and they degrade in as little as 3 to 5 years. Even 5% metal polycaps don't do that. They're much more transparent and clean to the audio path in your filter, which is the crossover. They have tweaked and smoothed out responses like engineering should. They have simple circuit paths. They use better op amps now and MOSFET, JFET, HEXFET than budget. So really what that does is budget components now are equal or better than very costly products in the recent past. Speakers like POLK and Klipsch got re-engineered and are better than ever before. There's nothing from the 90s or the early 2000s in terms of headphone amp or DAC that you can buy anywhere near the cost that's going to be as good as Shit Audio products are now. I know, I've owned them, and it's like there is a night and day difference in the performance. I'm getting resolution, smoothness, dimensionality, something that you would have to spend thousands of dollars for not that many years ago. Which brings me to the final point. What sonic opinion are you after? There really are only 3 major categories of speakers. The first is forward and bright. They emphasize dynamics and detail and may sacrifice that all-day listenability without fatigue. They might. They also might sound a bit two-dimensional. Horns can do that. Then there is the neutral-sounding speaker and monitor. You know, like your studio monitors, Polk, some Paradigm. They try for a more neutral front. NHT, there's a whole lot of them that try to keep their dynamics and everything else balanced and not in your face, but also not laid back, just kind of in the middle. That's where I'm at right now. Okay, they can be EQ'd one way or the other if you want more flavor or less. The final type is the gentle and laid back. These can be delicate and rolled off. Some, for me, are much too rolled off. I had the ELAC debut DBR 6.2. That tweeter is pathetic. I mean, there's no realism to it. There's no energy to it. It's just laid off and dull. I'm sorry, but that is a fail for a speaker. If it was a $299 speaker, I would get over it, but I can't because Emotiva, the Airmotive B1 is about that price, and the B1s blow the ELAC into the water. It's not even close. The Emotiva are better built with a much better tweeter. You can't go wrong with them. Klipsch, over the 2020, has been obviously watching. If you haven't done so already, you need to watch Danny Ritchie and the GR Research upgrade videos that he does. It's obvious that Klipsch was watching his videos because right after he did testing of the RP8000 and other speakers and pointed out that the drivers don't even meet in the middle. There's a huge chasm between mid and tweeter in the crossover. That means less presence, stuff's out of phase, it's harsh, and it lacks presence and detail. He did crossover upgrades and improved all these Klipsch speakers, and not long after, Klipsch followed suit, and they did that. I happen to have a set of the 8000 F2s, and I also have the RP5000 M2s because they are superior to the old 600s in that they have a better crossover. The drivers meet in the middle. It's much smoother and more coherent. The presence is better. The detail is better. They have improved. They are not your dad's Klipsch. They're not my old Klipsch that used to shout and scream at you and need tube amps and other things to soften them down just so they were listenable. Times have really changed. Back on the topic of the laid-back stuff. I've been to these boutiques where they sell things like Sonus Faber and other high-end but laid-back type products, and they usually won't let you audition metal or electronic dance music. That's because, face it, delicate speakers really aren't able to handle fast transients presented by metal music and EDM. They tend to sound, well, for a better term, bloated and slow, or rolled off soft, or the tweeter will just give up the ghost and distort, like on the new Sonus Faber Luminous. Those things were incompetent as far as I'm concerned. I don't understand why they cost $1,000 for the mini monitors or more for the floor standards when they just can't handle what I'm trying to listen to. They don't have the dynamic range in slam. They don't do loud very well. This is not an issue if you listen to acoustic, jazz, choral, and other gentle music, but it doesn't scream versatility to me, and it sure doesn't scream thousands of dollars. I believe in a speaker that can be a good all-rounder, like your old Paradigm Studio 100s. You could throw whatever at it and listen to it. That's great if that's what you like, but just remember, if you like EDM and metal, I wouldn't go for these laid-back speakers. You're just going to piss yourself off in the future and find out they're not really designed for that. And I've heard stuff up to the Karma Ceramic, some Avalon acoustics, and there's no way in hell I would buy those for those genres of music. They have their own way of excelling, and unfortunately it's for slower orchestral pieces, jazz, choral, and that kind of stuff. So to wrap this up, you know what a recovering audiophile means. You know it's a sickness. The Chinese even call it a sickness. They have their word for it, by the way. You know that affordable speakers are just as good as or better at high fidelity than high-end boutique speakers are in many cases, which will make you question your sanity as to why you would want to spend more. And everything depends on what sonic opinion you are after and how well you feed these speakers with source components. So don't be afraid of these things, as most of them have a return policy after you get to try them at home for up to 30 to 45 days. High-end don't. You buy it and they're yours. Last comment is that just remember, we are not living in the past. Drivers, engineering, and outsourcing are fact these days. It is very rare now that we get a true dud of a speaker. But there are duds in the high end and on the low end. The best judge is for you to listen at length to something, either audition them at home, listen to them all the time, and enjoy them. But make the right choice, the right stuff for the right mission, the right tool for the right job. Thanks to the guys that recommended POLK Audio Reserve. They're in my 2-channel and my desktop system. It's where they're going to stay.